Hi guys, I'm Amanda, the Botanical Brunette, and welcome to my channel. So I woke up this morning, and for those of you who don't know, I live in Orlando, Florida. There was frost on the ground. Frost! Like, I have not seen that in Florida. Like, that was wild. I'm originally from New Hampshire, so I am no stranger to like frosty climates, but I was like, what? So let's get into it. Let's talk about the topic of this video, Scindapsus. My absolute favorite plant right now is a Scindapsus Exotica. It's just so beautiful, guys. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how much I love this plant. I have had this plant in my care for a few months now, and I have learned some tips and tricks along the way. So I wanted to share that all with you this time and just kind of go over some Scindapsus care and also some propagation tips that I have learned along the way. And yeah, so let's go meet this beauty. Here she is in all her beautiful glory. Can we just like talk about these leaves for just a solid second? I mean, like, swoon. This is, I mean, just so beautiful. Like, I am absolutely in love with Scindapsuses all of a sudden. This was actually a predicted plant of 2022. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check that out. But this plant is just so pretty. Like, guys, if you don't have one of these in your collection, I'm gonna convince you right now. Let's talk about watering for this Scindapsus. The Scindapsus needs a good amount of water. I have found that it tends to be a little bit more thirsty than some of my plants, but they'll also let you know when it needs water. For instance, I have this guy right here, and you can kind of see the curled up leaves. This means that it's starting to get kind of thirsty, and they'll let you know when it needs like water. So it will have these, like, I call them taco leaves, but it will have these like really kind of like curled up leaves. But once you give it a good amount of water, they'll flatten right back out and be beautiful, just like these ones. I don't know why this strand is just thirsty, but I thought that was a good example of what it can show you when it needs water. I find that with all of my Scindapsuses, especially with my Exotica, I bottom water them. I know that like some people are fans of bottom watering and some people are not. I only really bottom water my Scindapsuses only because really I found that that just works. I don't know why. I have a Silvery Ann Scindapsus, and that plant is good. Like, I water it, but sometimes it still has the like curled up leaves even after watering. And I've also root rotted that plant in the past. So I just heard buzz around saying that people bottom water their Scindapsuses, and I tried it out, and honestly I probably won't ever water this any differently, just because it's just so much better when you bottom water your Scindapsus. Sometimes I'll give the plant a little bit of like water on top, just to kind of like, I don't know, I feel like subconsciously I need to water on top because I'm just so used to top watering. They'll just top water it just a little bit to get the topsoil a little bit moist, but for the most part, it gets most of its water from bottom watering. Now, again, this is like the only plant that I bottom water. Everybody else gets top watering. I just feel like the bottom watering just works for me. So on the topic of watering, I fertilize this plant like I fertilize really any plant. I fertilize about once to twice a month in the spring and summer, and then in the fall and winter, I fertilize this plant about once every month, maybe even less. And I also dilute my fertilizer a little bit more when I'm fertilizing in the fall and winter, just because I don't feel like they need that big punch. I mean, it is winter right now and it's still growing like really decently, like good growth. So, you know, it's just gonna do its thing. I found that this is like such a super fast grower. So I feel like I don't need to fertilize this as much. I know some plants, like my alocasia, I tend to fertilize that like a lot more just because alocasias are really heavy feeders. But this plant is not going to be that way. It's going to be a little bit of a lighter feeder than some of your other plants. For your lighting, because this does have a silvery variegation, to maintain that variegation, you're gonna wanna keep this in a really bright light area. Like I would say like high to medium, but no direct sunlight hitting it. I did have this in my southeast facing window in a hanging planter, and I did notice that the leaves started to burn a little bit. I actually chopped those off so I don't have any to show you. But it started to burn a little bit and I just kind of decided to just kind of move it away from the window. And ever since I did that, I have it next to the southeast facing window. So it does get a little bit of sun in the morning, but that's pretty much it. It just kind of lives in a really bright lit room like all the time. So yeah, so it just kind of lives in that room and it does really well in like just the like really like bright areas, just to maintain that variegation. Because it was variegated, I thought it would be a good idea to keep it in a southeast window in a hanging planter. But unfortunately it did look so nice in that planter, but it was not happy with me in there, so I decided to kind of move it. For environment, I'm gonna say for environment is going to be like your humidity and temperature. So these plants do really well in just regular house humidity. 40 to 50% is usually what they kind of go for, but they can also be totally fine in like 30%. Any lower than 30%, I would suggest maybe getting like a little humidifier to put next to it or like in the vicinity of it, but it doesn't require a ton of humidity, which is great because that just is one less thing that you have to worry about when you're taking care of the Scindapsus than to have to worry about like, oh my gosh, like I have to make sure that the humidifiers are running 24/7. And also temperature, you want to keep it at a room temperature. And I know that like I'm freezing right now because I mean like this, you know, New England girl has like adapted to Florida life like fully. So like 60 degrees is cold to me. But a good rule of thumb for any of your plants is if you're comfortable, they're comfortable. So just keep that in mind. So if you're really cold, your plants are probably really cold. Right before this video, I did put my heat on just because I'm like, it's a little freezing in here. But yeah, I mean, you want to maintain like no lower than like 60, 65 degrees. Then they start to really produce slower growth. So you want to make sure that your home temperature doesn't get below 60. Scindapsuses are also very toxic to pets, so make sure that you keep this away from them. Again, maybe not putting it in a window, but you can have it in a hanging planter. It looks fabulous in a hanging planter. It actually does trail really well. So it kind of like will trail like all over. And I've noticed that even though I let it trail, I'm still producing really big, lush growth, which is kind of uncommon for a lot of trailing plants. Sometimes when a plant trails, like my micans, it will develop really small leaves, where this, I have not noticed that. Hopefully I don't randomly just start producing small leaves, but so far so good. We're doing all right with that. If you have a dog or cat that kind of like is prone to like getting at your plants, just make sure that it's kind of like up on a shelf, and make sure this is away from any little critters that would be able to nibble on the leaves. For soil, you'll want to keep your Scindapsus. So for me, like I planted my Scindapsus in a pot that has like regular Fox Farm soil. I added a little bit of bark and a little bit of moss in there, some sphagnum moss, just to kind of help maintain the moisture, but also have it draining really well. I don't want, like I want that moss to really absorb when I bottom water, but also make sure that it doesn't hold on to too much water when it drains out. So just keep that in mind. You want a fast draining soil that's going to also hold moisture as well. I know that sometimes can be contradicting. A lot of people think like, oh, well, if it drains too fast and it doesn't hold moisture, it will. You just don't want your plants like sitting in sopping wet soil. So I have two separate propagations. I have two water propagations going, so they're fairly new, but you can see like some roots kind of popping through there. But these are super easy to propagate. I have propagated these several times in the past, and just Scindapsuses in general are just really easy to root. They're very similar to like a pothos. So if you have really good luck with pothos propagation, this is going to be just as easy. And I've also propagated them in moss, I propagated them in water, and I've also done soil propagation. It doesn't love soil propagation, just like a side note. I don't know if I did it wrong. I only tried it once and the leaves like curled like up completely. So it was very thirsty. Water propagation is literally my go-to. So I can tell you all day that water propagation is great. And also moss propagation is another new love that I have found. But it's kind of really just super easy to propagate. So I have that propagation, and also these are going to be available, just really quick, these are going to be available on my Etsy store hopefully in February. So keep an eye out on these little propagation stations. And then the bigger stem propagation that I have is this Scindapsus, also with my little Monstera Stanleyana. But this propagation is doing just as well. You can see, maybe you can see, I'll try to get that in focus, I'll take it out. So you can see like some roots starting to form, and I've had this in water. I've had both of these cuttings, like actually cut them at the same time. I've had both of these cuttings in water for less than a week, probably 5 days. So far so good. They're doing great in water. So that's it. Those are like my care tips for Scindapsus exotica. Very easy to care for, very simple plant, and beautiful plant. The exotica is probably my favorite in the Scindapsus category. I have two more Scindapsuses in my collection, which I'll do a collection video at some point. I probably want to get a couple more. I have a Silvery Ann Scindapsus, or the Satin Silver Scindapsus, and then I have a Scindapsus Moonlight. Those both are very easy to care for. My Moonlight is actually probably the easiest to care for, but the exotica is just such a beautiful plant. The lush, large leaves, just like I am just totally in love with. I love it so much. So let me know in the comments if you have a Scindapsus, or if you have any questions or anything like that for care tips. I'd be happy to answer them. And yeah, so that's it for today. I hope you guys all have a great day and stay botanical.